Our next speaker of this morning's session is Phyllis Cuttino, Director of the Clean Energy Program of the Pew Charitable Trust. Pew's Clean Energy Program works to accelerate the clean energy economy in order to seize its economic, national security, and environmental benefits for the nation. Phyllis joined the Pew Charitable Trust in 2007 as Project Director for the Pew Campaign for Fuel Efficiency, which played a role in improving our CAFE standards in this country, really for the first time in a generation. She's worked on the senior staffs of 2 U.S. senators and served as the Vice President of Public Affairs for Ted Turner's $1 billion gift to UN causes. She has a bachelor's degrees in political science and history from Furman University, and will talk to us today about policy and accelerating private investment in the clean energy economy. Phyllis, welcome.
Well, thank you, Mark. It's great to be here. I was in Michigan not too long ago, and it's always nice to come back. I can't claim that Ann Arbor is my home, but I do enjoy visiting. And I'm really excited to talk about the topic of change, challenge, and opportunity, because that is exactly the frame that we really see the clean energy economy through. So it's just a very timely conversation. A little bit about the Pew Charitable Trust before I start. I don't know how many of you know anything about the Pew Charitable Trust. We are an institution that has been in existence for more than 60 years. We are actually the beneficiaries of the Sun Oil fortune. We're based in Philadelphia. Pews are actually people, and we have 5 of them on our board. We used to be a private foundation, and now we have changed our tax status to become an NGO. We are nonpartisan, and we do many things. I'm sure that a lot of you listen to NPR and have heard something about the Pew Research Center and kind of the polling and media tracking we do, but we do a lot of other things as well. We do a lot of study on state fiscal health. We have an economic team. We have a pretty robust environmental portfolio, which focuses on oceans and also on public lands. And then, of course, we also do energy. Our energy frame is very simple. We've been doing energy and climate work for more than 25 years, and we really, right now, are really focused on trying to accelerate the clean energy economy by adopting pragmatic energy policies that have multiple benefits. So not just environmental benefits, but also national security and economic benefits. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about that today. You can see here we kind of work in these 4 key areas: industry, utilities, transportation, and then, of course, R&D. So I'd like to talk to you today about 3 of our recent research reports. We not only do national security research, the link between national security and energy, but a lot of economic research as well. And we have found that this is fascinating. We're always surprised by what we find year to year. So I'd like to talk to you about 3 reports. And the first report is who's winning the clean energy race. Oh, see. Let me go forward. This is an annual report we do. We've been doing it for now 5 years, and it tracks private investment among G20 nations. And it really, frankly, came from the first report we did, which really looked at state clean energy economies. And what we noticed there was states were very much competing against one another to attract private investments, jobs, and businesses to their states. And so that got us to thinking, well, if that's what states are doing, how are we kind of faring against our G20 colleagues? So we, as I said, we do this every year. It always turns out to be interesting. Last year was a year of tremendous change, very dynamic, not only geographic change, but also technological change. We saw a dip of investment. Investment was down about 11%, $263 billion for the sector. But remarkably, due to falling prices for technologies, we saw the biggest ever deployment of clean energy. We also saw that investment is moving from kind of the traditional markets of the West, so Europe, North America, or the Americas, to Asia, to the East. Japan, China, definitely leading in that role. And then we saw a switch in technologies where this was the second year that, in fact, solar technologies attracted the most private investment around the world. And a lot of that, frankly, was driven by kind of financial innovation. David talked a lot about innovation, financial innovation in the market and kind of this small distributed capacity that we're seeing. And then finally, outside the G20, this is the year that last year was the year we saw more investment in emerging economies than ever before. And that really looks like a market that is growing significantly, an opportunity for the United States. So just again, in terms of investment, you'll see here, it's pretty straight trajectory up. If you look, since we've been tracking since 2004, the orange is investment in the non-G20 countries, blue is investment in G20. You'll see we did have a dip, it's not as bad as the recession in 2009, but despite what we might worry about in terms of investment, if you look at how the sector has grown since 2004, $90 billion it adds every 3 years. So while we may worry about investment dropping a bit, I think we can pretty well see that this sector is moving forward and there's going to be tremendous economic opportunity. So I talked a little bit about deployment. We now have 648 gigawatts of clean energy installed around the world. Wind still is the largest part of that with 280 gigawatts. But solar is coming on strong. You can see here we have 31 gigawatts of solar added in 2012 alone. That is just a remarkable number. It's just more solar in a year than we had installed 4 years ago. It's quite remarkable. And we talked about natural gas and whether the pressure it's putting on clean energy. Well, 49% of all installed capacity, new installed capacity last year was renewable. And if you look to Europe, it's 70%, and some folks are predicting that around the world, all new installed capacity will be 50% in terms of renewables. So, and this is largely, a lot of this is largely driven by policy, but of course it's also being driven by the fact that these technologies are just dramatically falling in price. David talked about solar. It's just tumbled in the last few years. So this is always the chart we find worrisome, and this is really the title of our report, Who's Winning the Clean Energy Race? Because we think the United States does have a tremendous stake in the clean energy race. After all, these are largely technologies that we invented. We would like to see ourselves manufacture them and export them around the world and not only deploy them. And I think, if you look back to 2004, the United States really dominated this sector for 6 years. And then in the last few years, you've really seen jockeying for leadership between the United States and China. So obviously, China just far ahead last year. The prior year, the United States was up with $50 billion, leading China. But that was really driven, we believe, by the kind of uncertainty surrounding the PTC. So you saw a huge rush of investment into the United States to make sure that they could seize the advantage of the PTC. And then financing kind of pulled back and dried up a bit. So, it's this. I think this is very striking because you can see just how far China has come. And if you think about it, they were trailing. I think in 2004 they had something like $2 billion investment in the clean energy economy. So we worry about that. And here, this is just a chart that illustrates kind of the impact of the PTC, the impact of policy on investment, what happens. We had a 37% drop. You can see here with these bars, this is when the PTC, see this 13.6, the purple bar in the middle? And then boom, 2013, look at investment in wind, 2.8 billion, significantly drops off. But still, again, there is good news in the United States. 49% of all capacity was renewable. We had a remarkable 13.6 gigawatts of wind. That was really due to, as I said, the PTC and folks rushing in. And for us, 3.2 gigawatts of solar energy, which was installed, which again is just kind of for us astounding. Now, if you look around the world, Germany's installed 7 gigawatts of solar for the last 3 years. But still, for the United States, this is great. And I talked about the PTC and policy. And no matter what country you look at, policy really matters. Because investors are not going to go and invest someplace where they cannot make money. And if it's an uncertain climate, they're going to go elsewhere. So we look year to year about was there any policy drawback, and kind of what happened with investment. And no matter what country you have and no matter what policy you have, as long as it's stable and consistent and long-term, your investment grows. If you are a country that pulls back on your policy, investment will drop. And in some cases, you'll see the United States is down, China is up. China has a renewable energy goal. They want to install 200 gigawatts of wind by 2020 and 50 gigawatts of solar by 2020. That's their kind of clean energy standard, or renewable energy standard, if you will. And then, the real comers, I will say, if you look here, Japan, their investment was up 75%. They had a lot of very rich feed-in tariffs in the wake of the nuclear meltdown. And then also South Africa. South Africa's investment was up more than 20,000% in a year because policy was put in. And for them, it only meant 5.5 billion, but hey, it's 5.5 billion they really didn't have before. And Japan is, as I said, we really expect that that's going to continue to grow, and we'll see a lot of movement there. So that brings us to another report I want to talk about, which is we decided that looking at this kind of China-United States race, we really wanted to get down and explore the trade in clean energy between the two nations. You've all heard a lot about trade cases and other things. And so we really wanted to kind of figure out how we could unpack that. So we partnered with a firm called Bloomberg New Energy Finance, and they looked at 3 key sectors. So solar, wind, and what we call energy smart technologies. And this is, for 2011, this is the last year for which kind of comprehensive, full data is available. And they not only used their internal resources, but they went out and interviewed stuff. They used government databases, they looked at trade, and so on and so forth. And what we wanted to do was really look at not just the finished product, but the value chain. So you'll see this is the value chain we looked at in solar, everything from polysilicon materials to the PV systems. Here's wind, so all of the components that go into a wind turbine. You all in Michigan know a lot about the value chain. And then when we looked at energy smart technologies, these were kind of the 4 technologies that we really looked at. And we might be surprised, because we, in 2011, had a $1.6 billion surplus when it came to clean energy with China. Now, the bulk of our trade was in solar. Not surprising that big, heavy wind turbines were not a source of significant trade. And then I think energy smart technologies is really an emerging sector, and it's really uncertain kind of where that's going to go. Now, when you look at our advantages in, say, solar, we sent them capital equipment, we sent them materials, we sent them kind of the more sophisticated parts of a solar cell. They did a lot of finished assembly. So what's really clear is we do some things very well, they do some things very well, and there's really not a lot of competition in the things that each of us do well. Wind, same thing. If you kind of unpack these numbers, what you'll find is that we do a lot of kind of shipping them one thing and they ship us another thing. But energy smart technology is going to be very interesting, because the balance of trade with EVs and with lithium-ion batteries is almost exactly the same. So those are 2 sectors that we're really going to be watching. Now, in all fairness, I think that this was 2011, so this was before there was a kind of oversupply on the market, particularly in solar. So we're not selling them the Chinese kind of capital equipment in the way we were in 2011. So if we would go back and do this, which is a very lengthy and expensive project, we might find something different. But I think, again, it tells us a lot about what we do well and perhaps where we should be investing. Because our strength is very clearly innovation, our strength is very clearly advanced manufacturing. Our strength is that we have companies that are based all over the world. If you actually unpack the $2.6 billion surplus, if you count companies that manufacture all around the world, it's 1.1 billion of the 1.6 billion. If you just look at goods and services that were made here in the United States, that's 500 billion of the 1.6 billion dollars. So, we have a global footprint. We have 15,000 clean energy companies. They have 2,000 clean energy companies. So this is one of our strengths. And they have clear strengths too. Clearly, their strength is high volume manufacturing. So in many ways, we might have a very useful trade relationship with China because after all, the largest markets are outside of China, at least when it comes to export. So that led us to the third report that I'm going to briefly talk about, which is we said to ourselves, okay, our strengths are advanced manufacturing, innovation. We want to go out and actually talk to clean energy business leaders up and down the value chain and say to them, what do you need to thrive in this economy? In this economy, in this current policy sector or policy situation, what do you need? And kind of what is the status for you of the clean energy economy? And so we went to these places. We talked to financiers in New York with BNEF, with Bloomberg New Energy Finance. We had manufacturers in the Midwest with a series of manufacturing associations. We went to NREL in Colorado and pulled together entrepreneurs. We pulled together a lot of deployers in solar in Georgia and again in Jackson, Mississippi, and then we pulled together about 125 folks in Washington, D.C. for a summit. And so we asked them those questions. And you'll notice here that we didn't go to California and we didn't go to Massachusetts, but we went to kind of diverse geographic locations. So they were very clear about their challenges. And they said to us, our number one impediment is policy uncertainty. We don't know how to plan, we don't know how to invest, we don't know what it's going to look like here, we don't know what the state of our regulatory environment is going to be, we just don't know. And so it holds us back. And they had other things too, global oversupply, obviously there's a glut particularly of solar on the market, international competition. They said, listen, the competition is very stiff because not only are companies getting in on the act, but countries are getting involved in trying to protect their companies when they see this large and growing market. And of course, access to credit, that's not particularly unusual for the clean energy sector, it applies across the board. But they also said, and this gets back to policy, that it's just not a level playing field for them. That the incumbent, there are so many market barriers when it comes to the incumbent technologies. But it wasn't all bad. Look, they said to us they still feel optimistic about this sector and how they're going to do, overwhelmingly. They thought that there was tremendous financial innovation that was helping to support deployment here in the United States and around the world. They thought that the pace of technological innovation, David talked about this, was just remarkable and was going to continue. They talked about cost reductions, the tumbling prices for some of these technologies. They said, listen, as manufacturers, it's really hard for us to manage, but it's great for consumers, and that's what we need. We need something that is great for consumers. They were they said the increased domestic demand was very helpful, obviously, in deploying these. More than 25 states in the country have an RES. Of course, Michigan has one as well, and that was very helpful in terms of deployment. And they thought that there was a good opportunity for them to export. So they were looking at the global market. And so we said, okay, well, what are the policies that you think you need to be successful? And they said the number one thing we need is some kind of signal to the market, some kind of standard. They said it can include nuclear power, it can include natural gas, but we just need something that lays out a plan. And they said to us, hey, listen, the United States has done this before, right, when it comes to energy. We decided we were going to make electricity cheap and accessible to all. This is no different. Let's set out a roadmap that we can follow. And then they said, we really need to invest in U.S. energy innovation. This is just critical. We think that if we can be at the leading edge of innovation, we really can lead the sector around the world. And the government needs to do more, private business needs to do more, we all need to do more, but we've really got to keep the focus on energy innovation. And then they said, and we need to really reinforce incentives for private investment. So that is the investment tax credit, that is the production tax credit. And they said, we don't want these things to go on forever. We do not want to be dependent upon tax incentives forever. But just help us get to cost competitiveness. And they said, by and large, we think that would probably be the end of the decade, 2020 or a little sooner. And we can get there, and then we want to stand on our own 2 feet. They also talked about leveling the playing field again. And they said, why not offer us the same access to something called the master limited partners or real estate investment trusts that would allow us to access large private pools of capital the same way oil and gas infrastructure has very successfully, more than $400 billion worth of successfully, over the last several years. That would help us tremendously. So please do that. And then they pointed to the clean energy manufacturing tax credit, and they said this was a great tax credit. It was, there were more people that applied than that it could possibly help. It meant new manufacturing facilities and jobs in 46 states, not all 50 states, but in 46. Let's bring that back. That's important. And then finally, they said the government should really concentrate on helping us access new markets, so on trade. They should really help us reach out to new markets. And so, if I look at Michigan, you have more than 200 businesses in solar and wind alone. You have a state renewable portfolio standard, and look, it's been very successful. 1 gigawatt and $1.8 billion in private investment since it was enacted. You have an optimization law that's going to help consumers provide more choice and bring down costs. And, a very bright report for the future. And we know from looking around that Michigan is really one of the states that can lead in the clean energy economy, and has, because you have all the essential ingredients: research, strong facilities like this one, you have advanced manufacturing, large companies with a global footprint. So this is a place where the clean energy economy, in many ways, really grew up, particularly around some technologies, and we're really hoping it's going to continue to grow. So what about policy uncertainty? We're looking at Washington. Washington seems kind of a mess. What do we think the opportunities are when it comes to policy certainty? I will tell you that it's, at the present time, I do not look out across the horizon and see that we're going to have a national clean energy standard anytime soon. But I think there is an opportunity in tax policy. So Chairman Baucus, Chairman of the Finance Committee in the Senate, Chairman Camp, Chairman of the Ways and Means, are both working on broad tax reform proposals, which they both hope to put out early next year. And I think those can really provide a framework. And it's essential that when they are thinking about these things, that they're going to help provide some certainty in a level playing field. And look, tax policy is a way we've stimulated plenty of energy development in the past. This shouldn't be anything that's controversial and new. So what are we looking at as an opportunity? What are we doing? Well, we want to renew the production tax credit. We'd like to expand it to 2020. That's one critical thing. You saw the impact it had on kind of wind energy. We also think the investment tax credit needs some kind of technical fixes, both for solar, but also for other technologies, certainly waste heat recovery and combined heat and power. And then we want to make sure that clean energy businesses can access those broad pools of private capital in terms of a master limited partnership. So that's really what we're focused on. I think that at the end of the day, quite candidly, we'll have tax reform proposals that come out, and then I think at the end of 2014, we'll probably have what's called a tax extenders package. And I think it'll be a larger version of a small extenders package, so kind of a beefed up version. But we'll see. And so, when you're talking about new technologies, why would we be focused on, say, CHP? Well, for us, CHP is, again, the low-hanging fruit. You've heard that time and time again. Energy efficiency. We waste 68% of the energy, from traditional methods is wasted. That is just crazy. And we waste enough annually to power Japan for a year. Seems to me we could put that to more useful ways. So the Oak Ridge National Lab did a study. They looked at this. We said we could double the amount of combined heat and power that we have right now in the country, and it would reduce our energy use by 3%. It would save millions of metric tons in carbon emissions. It would attract more than $200 billion in private investment, and it would create 1 million skilled jobs in this country. So who uses it? I'm sure you all know a lot about CHP. Certainly, I'm very happy later today I'm going to go visit 2 CHP plants, one in Midland and one in Lansing. So I'm looking forward to that. But here in Michigan, there are 92 sites, and you get 3.1 gigawatts of installed capacity from CHP or waste heat recovery. So, and, you know, it's not, you know, you think about who uses it. Large, energy-intensive manufacturers, smaller manufacturers, and then a lot of institutions are turning to it, institutions that can't afford to have the lights go out. So I was just out in Vegas not too long ago, and I went to the MGM casino, and they have CHP. Why? Because if the grid goes down around them, they can still have power. Same thing with the Department of Defense and hospitals. Resilience is a word we're hearing a lot these days. If you look at just what happened with Hurricane Sandy, 8 million people without power when Hurricane Sandy hit. And if you look at the examples of where the power was on, New York University or Co-op City, the largest public housing unit in the country, or some wastewater treatment plants in New Jersey, they all had CHP. So increasingly, we're looking to CHP as a resilience measure. And we have found broad support. So if you, this is an ad we ran in Washington, and of course you can't read the fine print here, but the point is there's just a lot of different types of organizations and corporations that would sign on to CHP, that would support a new tax benefit or a change tax benefit that would help them access it. So here we are. But our focus over the next, you know, for Pew's point, our focus over the next several years is going to be on policies that do these things. Develop new technologies, attract manufacturing and jobs, export clean energy technologies, and compete globally. Because we think if we can get those policies, that U.S. businesses can not only survive, but thrive, and that the chart will look a whole lot different in terms of who's winning the clean energy race, if we can do it. So one other thing, I think I've got some time, I'll show you, if I could, how we kind of describe CHP and waste heat recovery to kind of a lay audience. I don't consider you all a lay audience. Or policymakers. And so we have a video. I'm not sure how we... Oh, there we go. Thanks.
New York City, October 2012. Hurricane Sandy left more than 8 million customers without electricity. But in some hospitals, universities, waste treatment plants, and residential complexes, the lights stayed on. How'd they keep the power running? The answer to that question has big implications for America's manufacturing sector and for any institution that needs a reliable, efficient, and cost-saving source of electricity. Today, nearly 2/3 of the fuel that is used to generate power escapes as waste heat, usually through cooling towers. However, if we recapture that lost energy, we can use it to create more electricity, or to warm or cool nearby buildings. We can do that by using proven technologies that are nearly twice as efficient as most systems, such as combined heat and power or waste heat recovery to improve industrial productivity. And combined heat and power is highly resilient. It proved its reliability after Hurricane Sandy and Katrina, and the blackout that swept across the Midwest and Northeast in 2003. Sounds pretty good, right? That's why many American factories, hospitals, colleges, and commercial buildings rely on combined heat and power. So many, in fact, that it already generates 12% of electricity in the United States. By improving efficiency, these companies and institutions also save on energy costs. But we could go even further. Adopting more of these technologies could help America's industrial sector attract more than $200 billion in new investment and add as many as 1 million high-skilled jobs. And along the way, manufacturers and institutions will be better prepared for severe weather. So let's stop wasting energy. Harness the heat today to make American manufacturers more efficient and globally competitive.
Great. Well, that's just a simple, energy is oftentimes a very complicated thing. And People like to switch on the lights, but they're not really sure how that happens. Most voters don't really think too much about it other than gas prices. So things like this are just ways that we can kind of help try and communicate what's at stake and what might be gained. What are the advantages? So, good.